Well, here we are, wrapping up another season of anime, and winter 2023 was certainly a strange season to behold. Some shows were a pleasant surprise, while others failed so spectacularly it'd be funny if it wasn't so sad. Not that I had high hopes, but let's just say the shows I dismissed as being plain found themselves worming their way into my heart, and those I was genuinely interested in fell to pieces by episode 3 at most. But enough vague posting, let's bury this season proper. Assuming you're subscribed, that is. If not, here's my obligatory plug to do so. That way you can stay up to date on content from me. Also, just another obligatory reminder, this isn't every anime from winter, but just the shows I grabbed. I'm not a completionist channel, and this is my follow-up to my season preview from January. So, let's begin. The good shows this season were certainly a surprise. Some of these I flat out rejected in my preview, but as they went on, they certainly got better and drew me in. We had some solid action, good comedy, and a few romances that stood out. So let's take a deeper look. Now, I didn't hate the first episode of Magical Revolution of the Reincarnated Princess and Genius Young Lady, but it really didn't stand out to me as special, since it felt like a mashup of otome game tropes and an isekai wrapper. That's intentional, to lull you into a false sense of security. This is an anime that uses those tropes to sideline your expectations, as it tells a Yuri romance story with light isekai elements. Ines may be reincarnated, but this isn't an anime about that. The memories of her past life spur her to meld magic and technology so she can live her dreams while making the world a better place. Her prim and proper romance interest is an otome game rival character archetype, yanked straight out of her comfort zone, thrown into this madness. I found myself enjoying their adventures, as they grew a friendship that was equal parts admiration and subtle romantic tension. The plot in this one happens as a consequence of the characters, and their dilemmas felt genuine, leading to an organic experience that packs fantasy, action, and solid character-driven comedy throughout its run. I also like how it tended to subvert the tropes it set up. In terms of animation, it really knew how to hammer home impactful story beats through subtle detail, ambiance, and fluid motion. This carried through its action scenes, leading to some intense moments. I found myself enthralled by this anime, and it certainly kept me coming back each week for more. Toma was another series that walked a tightrope. The first episode left me with the impression that this anime had one joke it would pile drive into the ground ad nauseum, and I was pleasantly surprised by episode 2. In actuality, this is a delightful romance anime about socially clumsy characters coming to a head. I'm getting pretty tired of the typical will they won't they dynamic, and seeing this use a more direct how does she get him to approach gave this series a lot of mobility. On top of that, the dense nature of the characters isn't just a joke. It's willful ignorance to cover up their embarrassment or feelings. That lends depth to their actions, but also tells us a lot about them as people. As for humor, it has that in spades. The joke that Jun doesn't see Tomo as a woman but as just another one of his friends is pervasive in the first half, but falls away as their friends try to rectify this situation. So with that, fish out of water jokes and situational humor arise to vary the comedy enough so it doesn't feel stale. On top of that, the character dynamics just work, where everyone from the core cast make every situation funny or heartwarming no matter who's on screen. The animation for this was subtle in its quality. On the surface, the frames all look incredibly detailed, but the way it shows emotion is what really stood out to me. For rom-com, it really had no business being as well drawn as it was, but I'm definitely thankful for it. A surprisingly wholesome entry this season. Oni-chan wa Oshimai had my attention from the start, as it picks up with a really bog-standard doujin plot, but quickly diverts away from dumb jokes about how a guy doesn't understand girls. It instead settles into a more Lucky Star-style slice-of-life pace, where Mahito has to adapt to life as a girl, and definitely not in a way that was whitewashed, literally dealing with the male gaze, periods, and struggling to keep up with the beauty standards her new body puts on her. It uses that to reintroduce a recluse otaku back into society. Yeah, and it might be a bit creepy she's a middle school girl, but she makes friends and resumes a fairly normal life. What I found gave this series heart was the fact that it wasn't done with malice or as a joke. The plot is kicked off because Mahito's little sister loves her big brother enough that she wants to help him live a normal life. And yeah, it's a heavily transcoded series, as Mahito's life changes for the better now that she's a girl. It has a weird mix of laid-back humor, school slice-of-life stuff, and the dirtier parts of otaku culture that make this series a struggle to recommend to a wide audience. But it's definitely not raunchy either. I will give a lot of credit to the studio here, as the animation for this series blended traditional and CG to create an aesthetic that meshed well, but this allowed for more dynamic and creative shots that otherwise wouldn't have been possible. The series is cute, and I definitely enjoyed it. Buddy Daddies hit the ground running and never stopped. This anime was a blast. Two hired assassins accidentally adopt the daughter of one of their targets, and now they have to balance their jobs and daily life taking care of her. From finding a daycare, making sure she's fed, and having her make friends as she helps them address the traumas in their lives. I think I like this one because of how unapologetic the cast is. Miri is borderline annoying, and that's kind of the point. She's a kid, and one who gets on your nerves, doesn't listen, but is also sweet and livens up the lives of the two leads. This is another comedy series with a strong emotional heart that grew more as the series went on. And yeah, it dabbles a little bit in the darker side of humor, but I think that lends itself well due to the fact that these characters are really messed up. Everyone in this series, including Miri, has had a pretty shit life. The thing is, Miri's too young to really understand that, and it's through this shared relationship of the three that they're able to heal. While Miri's presence leads to these changes in our two assassins, it doesn't directly cause it in of itself. Kazuki losing his wife and unborn child years prior and finding the ability to move on isn't directly because Miri is there, but more her being in his life is what allowed him to find this path. Same with Rei, as he comes to understand what a normal family life is. I'm not gonna harp on the animation for this one, it has its moments, and was solid throughout. But it also wasn't the thing that made this anime for me. It was the comedy and relationships. Campfire cooking in another world with my absurd skill felt like a strange sort of budget show that really surprised me, because the fantasy world and majority of the animation didn't really jump out at me. The campfire cooking in the title was a lot more apt than expected, as a normal office worker gets sucked into another world and rather than fighting to save it, decides to screw off and go live a plain life. Why? Because he can see just how much trouble it would have been, and after having talked to some merchants, yeah, he dodged a bullet. His whole getting a legendary beast as a familiar reeks of the tired OP protagonist trope in isekai, but I respect this series for using it more as a gag than anything else. The real point of this anime is watching this dude cook, and hopefully narrate before you eat, because the effort that went into animating these food sections is astounding. I like this anime a lot because it was pretty chill. Yeah, there was fighting and monsters, but that's just to get ingredients so he can cook up dinner and save a bit of money so he doesn't have to use his online shopping skill. This show really didn't have to be as entertaining as it was, using the back and forth between the nigh omnipotent monster and weak-ass human bickering like an old married couple for comedy, and packing in quick cooking lessons between that. But hey, I was down for it. Don't go into this expecting your traditional isekai experience, because this stuck up a middle finger and walked away from that in the first episode. And hey, we're better for it. Kubo-san got done dirty by COVID. That was kind of a running theme this season. That right as some of these shows were getting off the ground, production got hit with delays. That sucks. And this series is the one I felt the hardest. This was an incredibly slow, character-driven, subtle romance story about an otherwise unremarkable guy who barely registers to most people. And yeah, of course, a popular girl, why not? But she has an interest in him due to his apparent unnoticeability. That may be a bit cliched, especially since we've seen so many of these before, but there's a lot of sweet moments in this one that ooze awkward adolescence. Kubo teasing Shiraishi comes off as endearing, and as her way of flirting with a guy who's so not used to attention he can't even fathom someone talking to him. Setting aside the fact it's a girl who's interested, it does that well by putting these characters in situations that bring that shyness and embarrassment to the surface. Ultimately, it's a slow burn sort of show that lays low until the moment is right to hit you with a dose of cuteness, thus making it all worthwhile. Backing that up is animation and style. This series exudes that atmosphere with soft, washed out colors, intimate close-ups, and beautiful art that accentuates the subtle emotions playing on Kubo's face. This was definitely the romance to watch this season, even if it's a shame we'll have to wait until the next to see it completed. The Vampire Dies in No Time felt less like a second season and more like the first one just didn't end. The quality of this show is maintained seamlessly. A comedy so over the top and aware of its absurdity, it's completely comfortable dragging you along for its episodic fever dreams. What describes the humor here is horny, nonsensical running gags. And it's not so much that there's fan service, but that the series is out to kill the concept of male nudity as a punchline. I've mentioned how much fun the cast is having here, and it still shows. If anything, it's ramped up its zaniness in a way to keep longtime fans hooked. I'm pleased to see this return, and definitely recommend people to check it out if they're looking for some off-the-wall comedy. Next up, we have our middle-of-the-road shows that barely left an impact. They're not bad, but generally had a thing or two holding them back from ranking higher on this list. Most of these come with a conditional recommendation. So, if that's you, you might want to check it out. Let's get into it. Isekai Nonbiri no Ka wasn't bad at all. I'd even say it was pretty enjoyable, but ultimately I put it down here because it also didn't have much to make it stand out. OP guy doing his own thing in a fantasy world as hot girls gather around him like rain in a collector during a storm. That pretty much sums it up. We've seen it before. The only difference here is he's not aware of just how strong he is, and just wants to live his little farming simulator dream. The rate at which this series added waifus was pretty dizzying, especially since their personalities round down to half a trait after the first two. So what's the main story here? There really isn't one. Just various overpowered beings seeing this dude's little village develop combat strength incidentally, and shitting their pants as they scramble to establish diplomatic ties and eat his amazing food. Yeah, that's it. The animation was pretty decent. I mean, it looks nice. That's about all I can really say, since it didn't exactly impress me overall. Yeah, another competent product. So this is just another slow-paced isekai without much else to it. If you like isekai, you'll probably like this. The ice guy and his cool female colleague didn't really impress me either. Maybe I'm just getting too old to have the patience for these sort of shows, but this just wasn't the anime I wanted at this point in my life. Plot progression is pretty much non-existent. And don't get me wrong, this show is a very competently done office rom-com, but the slow pace and characters never really making any sort of progress fell flat for me. Mostly because these people are just far too perfect for one another, but don't make any moves because, I don't know, that might be what an adult actually would do. The folklore elements are a nice twist, but ultimately contribute very little to the story. And the characters, while exceptionally cute, stop at just that. There were other shows this season that landed better, but I also see the merit to this one. As for the art direction, it was a highlight that made me watch this series because it sells the whole cute motif the characters have without being creepy. Vivid colors, visual gags, and excellent reaction shots that almost trick you into thinking this relationship might actually go somewhere. If you're a slice-of-life rom-com maniac and need more, this is for you. But I would recommend that this is more suitable for a binging format, as it's a great way to kill an afternoon. Week to week though, it was a little too slow to keep me interested. I was ready to like Sugar Apple Fairy Tail more than I did. Yeah, a fantasy story free of the current trope trend of an OP person mucking about without purpose. Instead, it's a fairly traditional sort of character living in a new setting with its own rules. So, unlike most fantasy stories out now, I was down to see this girl try and become a sugar craftsman. But ultimately it fell short of my expectations, because the initial hook wore off as the story wrapped up its first arc. From there it transitioned into a more adventure of the week sort of format, and that was less engaging. The target audience here is women, and I'm not saying that disparagingly. Those tend to have a leg up due to the rarity of their adaptations, better quality in their productions, and unfamiliarity in their tropes, making them feel less stale than most other anime on the market. In terms of a plucky go-getter trying her hardest to live up to her mother, a vitriolic beautiful fairy, and a sightseeing tour around a medieval European setting with a bigger focus on character drama, then whoever's power level is bigger, yeah, this does an okay job. Its pretty art style makes it appealing to look at too, with striking designs, soft colors, and a focus on showing off what makes this world unique. My biggest issue with it is, I guess I just wanted more of the story, and it didn't deliver on that. If you're looking for something different in the fantasy genre, this is worth a look. I'm honestly confused how The Angel Next Door Spoils Me Rotten has been so well received. I mean, it's not a bad show, I guess, but it also really doesn't stand out. Yeah, it's a fairly straightforward plot of an average guy without much happening in his life, somehow befriending the popular girl at school, and the two start crushing on each other pretty hard. There's a million of these, so why watch this? I honestly couldn't tell you. The dynamic between the two leads isn't unique, the cast are paper cutouts with insert tragic backstory to make them more relatable, while coddling the audience with useless fluff scenes. So it's incredibly pandering wish fulfillment in the worst sense. There's no stakes or tension, and that really wouldn't be a problem if the story didn't play up small stuff as such. Unfortunately, it's also not egregiously bad, so I can't say it's not watchable, just tedious to sit through, with a whole lot of cute moments that make it a bearable experience. So it's pure fluff. Project 9's animation is the same as always, delivering a samey product that blends into their other works, so check this out if you're looking for a plain romance story with zero bells, whistles, or surprises. Chillin' in My 30s is the poster child of my gripes with current anime trends. This show is another OP guy in a fantasy world deciding he wants to live a normal life, but trouble keeps finding him, so of course he has to fight back. There's no character depth. Just a nice main character who wants everyone to get along, his big titty waifu who's super strong for no reason, and every antagonist ends up as his friend eventually. Stakes? There is none. Hell, there's barely a plot. This is meant to be a bunch of strung together action scenes with ecchi moments to hold it all together. The animation is laughably plain, with no real effort put in to give scenes strong moments to stand out. So it probably sounds like I hated this thing. Why is it up here? Well, Ice Blade Sorcerer was out this season, so spoilers. But also I somehow kept coming back each week, confirming this series is pretty much junk food. It has an audience that loves this sort of crap, just one-sided fights with big boobs flopping about, and it never really billed itself as anything more grandiose than that. In fact, it's a perfectly fine, forgettable experience. Nagatoro really didn't have the staying power this season. I liked this season enough, the relationship between her and her senpai had some progress, but I just didn't feel it as much as I did in the past. Hell, it even feels like they scaled back on the animation, giving the later episodes a noticeably lower quality. The jokes hit about the same at least, and Nagatoro's antagonistic tendencies get curbed quite a bit, as everyone's picked up on her feelings except her and her senpai. So it's progress, just slow progress. In terms of this living up to the first season, I would say it didn't, as it feels very middle of the road in terms of adaptation. If this gets a third season, I'd watch it, but it definitely feels like the charm is worn off by this point. Recommended for fans of the show, and if you're into teasing girls, this might be up your alley. The Misfit at Demon King Academy was another series that took a hiatus due to COVID, and this one's only ranking down here due to the fact that it got hit in the middle of the season right as it was ramping up. This gave me some serious blue balls, because the direction it was heading in was pretty damn good, but that also means I can't really give it a fair estimate until it concludes. So it's ranking down here, not higher, because the first half was a bit meandering, but the plot was definitely going somewhere. There also really wasn't a chance for the animation to shine like it did in Season 1, so that's why I'm justifying placing it in the middle of the road part of my video, because we just don't really know how this is gonna live up to its own hype. Luckily the series is due back in spring, so we'll get our answers pretty soon. Last up, we have the shows that just didn't cut it this season. These are the anime that lacked in plot, storytelling, or otherwise just had some crippling flaw that doomed them to fail. And hey, some lucky few had all three. Let's take a look. Ningen Fushin was done dirty by the studio rather than COVID this time around. I was lucky enough to have Yen Press send me a copy of the first book, and having read it in parallel to the first 4 episodes, yeah, the anime gutted an otherwise decent story. It ripped out a lot of the character tension and dynamics that define the survivors, as well as the fantasy world they inhabit. Hell, they just flat out dropped the foreshadowing for the direction of this story, because I'm guessing the studio is assuming they won't get another season. The first 3 or so episodes had a decent look to them, competent action scenes and artwork, but I definitely called it when I said this wouldn't be able to keep up its quality. Little did I know just how much of an understatement that was, as the latter half of this show is fucking abysmal, suffering from stilted animation that doesn't match the background, floating characters, and awkward off-model moments that make this series feel entirely like a budget piece. And we're not talking for like a frame or two. Sometimes it's like whole conversations. That's stupid. There's a lot more story here than what the anime covered. If you enjoyed what it did cover, I would highly recommend picking up the light novels rather than subjecting yourself to 12 episodes of this. And just to kind of cover my ass here legally, Yen Press didn't pay me for this coverage. That's just my own personal thoughts. Spy Classroom was not what I was expecting, like, at all. I was hoping for a more grounded and realistic spy story about some underdogs tackling an impossible mission, all while they became more competent along the way. What we got instead was a goofy, no-stakes, cliched spy story that peaked after 3 episodes. I dropped it around episode 6 when this also got hit with COVID delays, and I couldn't really be bothered to pick it back up once the series started going again. My issue is, it geared them up to do this impossible mission, cuts to them doing it after skipping their training, successfully completing it, and then afterwards decides to go back and cover the training they just skipped. I'm sorry, did this mix up some script pages or something? What the hell's going on here? At that point, I couldn't really care because we knew the end of it, and the stuff meant to build up the cast was skipped until after the payoff. There's a reason stories are generally told in chronological order, unless not doing so allows you for better revelations about the story, and we didn't get that here. It's billed as a comedy series primarily, and that registers, but the humor doesn't improve beyond the issues I had in the first episode, where it almost felt like they put pause for laughter in the script. As for the animation itself, it's lacking in the actual animation portion, since we're struggling to make sure our bloated cast is as cute as possible for every single frame. The thing is, I almost kinda get what they're going for, or at least I have an idea. If this was meant to be an idol show inspired affair with spies, populating it with a quirky cast of misfits to come together, I think it had the potential to do something interesting. But this fell flat because it's not entirely sure what it's even trying to convey. A severely mixed message leaves me unable to even find an audience to possibly recommend this to. So, I'm not. Ice Blade Sorcerer was exactly what I was expecting it to be. Bad anime is bad. It looks like a particularly talented group of YouTubers decided to turn their fanfic from when they were 14 into an anime. The issue is, this isn't a group of YouTubers, but an actual studio, with a real budget, adapting an actual light novel. So yeah, the animation is that bad. It's stiff, horribly edited, and lacks spatial awareness, but it's less distracting than the plot itself being a horribly cliched mess. This series mashes up the OP fantasy protag trope that's popular right now with the whole sealed power trope from every shonen series out there, while throwing in a dash of Naruto edginess because the main dude's picked on, of course. Just gonna come clean? I hate this. Anyway, run all that through a magic school with an evil organization pulling some strings, and you've officially arrived at the most generic anime on the market at the moment. I think it's pretty sad the most well-drawn art in this series is the ending credits that's just the main girls in this dude's harem laying naked on a bed, having some sheets covering their chests. This show is awful. The only people who will like it are younger teens who don't know any better, and those who ironically like garbage anime. That's about it. Hikari no O fell into the trap I foresaw in my preview. The director couldn't stick the landing by not focusing the plot. It's split between two main characters, and neither story is particularly interesting, since neither has agency or personality. And that's sad, because the premise of this world has a lot of potential. What really put the nail in this thing's coffin for me though was the animation. It quickly went from could have style in the first episode to, oh no, this is actual trash by the second. My usual complaints are, oh, it's stiff, but that's not the case here. Most of the art deforms into a garbled mess on screen that's completely indecipherable. When you can figure out what's going on, the characters just seem like they're floating in the action scenes. The CG was painfully distracting due to the fact that the team didn't even try to blend it with their drawn art at all. I didn't waste much time on this series, because after the third episode, I realized I was in for a poorly told visual mess. One that certainly couldn't hold my attention, so definitely skip it. With that, we finally put a cap on winter 2023. Most shows this season impressed me more than those that disappointed. Action, comedy, and romance all really stood out. I'm definitely here for more series that can break away from the current isekai and fantasy trends. But tell me your thoughts down below. What shows did you like this season? I'd love to hear it. For now though, you've made it to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and do all the other YouTube stuff to help the channel grow. You can also join my Discord with a link down in the description, and if you really want to support me, you can head on over to my Patreon and pick up some extra perks. Specifically, hey, you can vote on what I'm going to watch next season. That poll should be up now. But speaking of Patreon, I'd like to give a special thanks to Robin DBL and Shriken for their continued support. Thanks for watching.